Let me take you back to 2018 in Germany. It was a windy but clear day. It was one of those days where the air feels fresh, your lungs feel alive, and nothing should go wrong. Or so you think. I was on my usual dog walking route, a quiet road mostly used by farmers heading to their fields. My 2 Labrador retrievers, normally the poster dogs for unbridled enthusiasm, were suddenly just not feeling it. These are dogs that consider walk the ultimate magic word, and yet they refused to move. They dug in their paws and started whining like I'd just canceled Christmas. At first, I thought, weird, but maybe they're just being dramatic. And then I heard it. I heard a low-frequency hum, like the sound of a plane flying way too close for comfort. Naturally, I looked up to scan the sky because plane spotting is totally part of the dog walking experience. But nothing. Just clear skies from every angle. At this point, my 2 dogs were doing everything short of filing a formal complaint to convince me to turn back. But being the ever-curious human that I am, I decided to look around and figure out what was causing their sudden existential crisis. That's when I saw it. About 15 meters away, in a horse field, minus the horses that day, stood something wrong. It wasn't a person, it wasn't a machine, it was some nightmarish hybrid of both. The kind of thing that makes you question your entire understanding of reality. It was silver, almost chrome-like, with vaguely human features that felt someone had hit randomize on an alien design software. 4 limbs, all ending in sharp, oil-dipped edges, and a head that looked like it had been constructed in a factory, not born. The whole thing was blinking, not like a malfunctioning robot, but like it was deliberately watching me. Its nose and mouth were more like unsettling gaps. On top of its head was this cone-shaped cutout holding a golden orb that shimmered in the sunlight. Honestly, it looked like it had a crown, which was fitting because this thing is the king of terrifying field creatures. Now, I'm not proud to admit this, but the moment that I locked eyes with this thing, I felt 2 things simultaneously. Absolute primal fear and the sudden urgent realization that my fight-or-flight response leans heavily towards flight. The longer I stared, the worse it got. It was muscular-like, not like a supervillain gym rat muscular, but also not in an organic way. It looked like someone had carved muscles into a metallic shell. And then there were the cables, and the stripes, and the sheer just absurdity of the whole thing. It felt like my brain was trying to process something that I wasn't supposed to see, and it was not handling it well. At this point, I wasn't just scared. I was on the verge of literally browning my pants. My dogs were done. They were pulling at their leashes like, "Come on, human, let's not die today." I tried to move, but my body felt frozen, like I'd become one with the road. After what felt like 30 years, but was really probably closer to 30 seconds, I managed to unstick myself, turn around, and book it. And when I say I ran, I mean I bolted like my life depended on it. Because I think it did. My dogs, bless their hearts, had no problem keeping up because they knew this was no time for sniffing grass or chasing butterflies. When I got home, I told my parents and my brother about what happened. They believed me, or at least they said they did, but I could tell there was a hint of, "Oh, sure, you saw a nightmare robot in a field," sort of skepticism. I hated myself for leaving my phone at home that day, because without any proof, my story was just a story. For weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. Therapy helped me process it, kind of, but the memory stuck. To this day, I can't hear an airplane without feeling my anxiety spike. I even downloaded a flight tracker app to make sure that any hum that I hear is actually a plane and not, it coming back for round 2. Now, 6 years later, I still walk by that spot sometimes, but only with my brother for backup. And even though I've come to terms with the fact that I'll probably never understand what I saw, I can't help but wonder, was I the only one? My question to you is, if anyone out there has ever seen a silver nightmare creature with an oil-dipped aesthetic and a golden head orb, please tell me. Misery loves company, and I'd love to know that I'm not alone in this. OP includes an update that says, now, 6 years later, I finally decided to revisit the spot where I saw it. Why, you may ask? Closure, curiosity, and maybe the faint hope that I wouldn't find anything and convince myself that it was all just a bad fever dream. But also, because as millennials and Gen Xers, we've been trained by movies like Signs and the Blair Witch Project to confront the creepy stuff just for the sake of answers. I'd avoided this spot for years, always taking a detour when I was with my brother because, well, trauma. But this time, I went alone. Just me, my shaky nerves, and the soundtrack of The Twilight Zone playing on a loop in my head. The property was private, but the electric fence was gone, and the place looked abandoned. That's the universal sign for it's totally fine to poke around, right? When I got to the exact spot where I saw it, I felt like Frodo revisiting Mount Doom. Well, no ring, but all of the PTSD still. I even took a picture to mark the moment, because if there's one thing that we've learned from Instagram, it's pics or it didn't happen. Here's where things got interesting. The vegetation in that spot was kind of weird. And by weird, I mean it looked like something out of a Goosebumps book. The grass was patchy, some areas looked burned, and it was the only place in the entire field that had this scorched, post-apocalyptic vibe. My first thought? Oh, great. It left behind an alien crop circle but tried to make it subtle. My second thought? This is how War of the Worlds starts. And here's the kicker though. The closer I got, the more uneasy I felt. You know that gut feeling you get when you're about to make a bad decision? It's like replying to an email that says you've won a free cruise. It was like that, but times 10. After snapping a few photos like a paranormal investigator on a budget, I hightailed it out of there. Now I'm here, armed with photos and about 1 million more questions. What caused these burns? Why does that spot feel like the setting for a low-budget sci-fi thriller? And most importantly, how do I investigate this further without ending up on the next episode of Unsolved Mysteries? Is that show even still running? I'm hoping someone out there, like a botanist, a plant whisperer, or maybe even a crazy conspiracy theorist with a solid PowerPoint presentation, can shed some light on this. After 6 years, I've finally mustered the courage to dig deeper, and your ideas could help me get to the bottom of this mystery. To everyone who commented on my original post, thank you. Talking about my encounter openly felt like a scene from Good Will Hunting. It's not your fault. And now, revisiting the site, I feel a little less afraid. Not brave, exactly. I mean, I'm not strapping on ghost hunting gear or anything, but, a lot less paralyzed by what I saw. If you've got theories, ideas, or just want to say, hey, this thing sounds like it's out of Stranger Things, drop a comment. Let's figure this out together before Netflix steals the idea for their next series. Let me take you to October 20th, 2019, in Cucuta, Colombia. I was on vacation, living the dream, or so I thought. My parents had this tradition of taking short trips to South America, and I figured I'd keep the family legacy alive. I rented a house for my stay, not exactly the Ritz-Carlton, but it worked. I had all the essentials: a bed, a kitchen, and most importantly, a TV perfectly positioned in front of the bed. That's the golden setup right there, folks. Feng shui for lazy evenings. That night, around 8 p.m., I was doing what any of us would do when we were supposed to be relaxing. I was doom scrolling on my phone. The only thing that my mind was on was waiting for dinner to finish cooking. Then, like the opening act to a horror movie, I heard this weird sound. Imagine a didgeridoo, that deep, haunting drone that seems to, vibrate your soul. Except I wasn't at an Aboriginal cultural event. I was just in my room. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe some guy decided to have an impromptu street concert. Weird, but not impossible. But then I looked up and I saw it. A face peeking right through my window. Now, this wasn't just any face. No, this face looked like someone had run it through Photoshop's melt filter and then cranked up the horror settings. Its skin was a mud brown color, like it had been left out in the rain for too long. No nose, and perfectly circular black eyes, and a smile that didn't just stay on its mouth, it extended up to its cheek on one side, like it wanted to be the next Joker. I was able to see inside the mouth, and it was completely empty. No teeth, no tongue, just a void of nothingness. It was like staring into the abyss looking at this thing, except the abyss was staring back at me and humming a didgeridoo solo. I froze, half expecting it to start spouting cryptic riddles or offering me a cursed treasure map. After a few solid seconds of what in the Guillermo del Toro is this, I snapped out of it. My survival instincts kicked in, and I bolted to the kitchen. Forget a flashlight or calling for help. This was a grab the biggest knife you can find kind of situation. I returned to the room, knife in hand, feeling like a terrified Gordon Ramsay. The face hadn't moved. It was still there, staring, unblinking, and humming that eerie tone like it was the star of its own horror movie. For 4 or 5 of the longest minutes of my life, I locked eyes with this thing. It didn't move, it didn't blink. It was just there, violating every unspoken rule of personal space. Finally, I watched it turn its head to the right and then vanish, taking its unnerving soundtrack with it. The silence that followed was almost worse, though. I rushed to the door and saw its shadow beneath the light outside, proving that it wasn't some figment of my overactive imagination. It was real, and it had been right there. Once the adrenaline rush subsided just enough for me to move, I shut the window like I was trying to seal a portal to another dimension. And sleep? Forget it. I spent the night replaying the scene in my head, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was just some really unfortunate hobo who wanted to peek inside. But no, there's no way a regular human could have peered into that window. It was 2 meters off of the ground, overlooking a cracked and unfinished construction site. Spider-Man couldn't have even pulled that off. This was the first time that I'd seen something that I couldn't explain. And let me tell you, reading about creepy encounters on the internet is a whole different ballgame from living through one. The experience has stuck with me. Even now, I can't hear a low humming noise or see a shadow outside without thinking about that face. To this day, I haven't told many people about it, but I'm sharing it now because, who knows, maybe someone else has seen something similar. If you've ever had a didgeridoo playing face-melted creature visit your window, hit me up. I could use some validation. Let's rewind to 4 years ago. It was a typical family get-together. Parents, cousins, my grandmother, all hanging out at my house, catching up, and probably arguing over whose tea recipe is the best. My mom went out back for a smoke, which should have been uneventful, but instead, she came back in, looking like she'd seen the ghost of Christmas future. She asked me, "Why were you outside in the woods, staring at me like a creep?" Spoiler alert, I wasn't. I was inside, happily chatting with my dad, nowhere near the woods. Naturally, we all shrugged it off like, "Oh, you must have just been seeing things," because that's how British people handle unsettling situations. Looking back, that was mistake number 1. Fast forward to just last year. I was lounging in the living room, minding my own business, when my dog suddenly just lost it. Barking, growling, full-on Cujo mode. Something had riled him up in the conservatory. Now, this isn't super unusual. The town that I live in, Devon, is practically a rabbit buffet, and my dog loves a good chase. But then I heard it. My voice. My actual voice. Coming from the conservatory. I froze, and for a brief, stupid moment, I thought, did I leave a podcast running or something? But no. I checked outside, and nothing. Not a rabbit, not a person, just silence. And if you're thinking, hey, that's a red flag, dude, then congratulations, you've officially got better instincts than I did at the time. Then, just last month, things escalated from DEFCON 1 levels of terrifying. I was cleaning the kitchen, because what better time for existential dread to hit, right? When I looked out into the woods and saw me, just standing there, staring back at me like a glitch in The Sims. And when I say me, I mean a perfect copy. My face, my clothes, everything. Except this version of me wasn't moving. It was like a human statue, just standing there, radiating this creepiness. I bolted to the conservatory door, but by the time I got there, it was gone. Like it had never been there. Last Saturday was the cherry on top of this nightmare Sunday. I was upstairs, working on a project, when I heard my voice again. This time, it was asking to be let in. Let me repeat that for dramatic effect. I heard my voice asking to be let into my house. My dog was going ballistic, and things went from bad to worse when this thing started clawing and scratching at my windows and doors. It sounded like Freddy Krueger himself was trying to guest star in my life. I called the police faster than you can say nope, and I packed a bag to stay with my parents. So here I am, hiding out in my parents' place, trying to figure out how to deal with this doppelgänger from hell. I've heard of evil twins in movies and shows, like Us, but experiencing it firsthand, that's a whole different level of nightmare fuel. If anyone out there has any advice, maybe you've read about this in folklore or seen something similar in Supernatural, I don't know. I'm all ears. I just want this to stop before this thing tries to break into my house again. And to my not-so-friendly woodland twin, if you're reading or listening to this, because who knows, maybe you've got my Wi-Fi out there too, please take your creepy invasion of the body snatchers energy elsewhere.